The door slammed shut behind him with a sound that felt final. A deep, metallic echo that seemed to swallow every trace of air from the small concrete cell. Marcus Tone Ramirez pressed his palms to the door, but it didn't move. The metal was cold enough to bite his skin. On the other side, footsteps faded until all that was left was the hum of the fluorescent light above him. He was now officially in the SHU, the security housing unit of Pelican Bay State Prison. For years, he'd heard stories about this place. They called it the box, the tomb, and the end of the road. It was where men disappeared from the world, locked in complete isolation for years, sometimes decades. Inmates joked that if hell had a waiting room, it would look like the SHU. Tone looked around the cell. It was smaller than he expected. The walls were bare concrete, painted dull gray. The bed was just a steel frame bolted to the floor with a thin mattress that looked older than he was. A small slit of frosted glass near the ceiling let in a faint white glow. He had a toilet, a sink, and a slot in the door just big enough for a food tray. No windows. No sound. No faces. But that wasn't what scared him. What scared him was what he had been told before the guards locked him inside. "You'll start hearing things," one of them had said. "Voices. Whispers. Don't answer them." At first, Tone laughed it off. He'd been in tough spots before, fights, riots, stabbings. But as the hours turned into days, and the days began to melt together, he realized the guard hadn't been joking. The silence in the SHU wasn't normal silence. It was heavy, like the walls themselves were listening. Sometimes, at night, when everything went still, Tone swore he could hear tapping. Just faint, irregular knocks coming through the concrete. Tap, tap tap. Pause. Tap. He thought it was his imagination until one night, the taps came back, this time, in rhythm. Too organized to be random. He pressed his ear to the wall and listened carefully. Tap tap. Tap. Tap tap tap. Then silence. Tone sat up, heart racing. He didn't understand it, but it didn't feel like madness. It felt like someone was talking to him. He hesitated, then decided to try something. He raised his fist and tapped back, copying the pattern. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, tap tap. Tap. Tap tap tap. The same rhythm, repeated from the other side. That was the night Tone realized the SHU wasn't as quiet as it seemed. Beneath the silence, there was a whole hidden network of voices, men who had learned to talk through the walls. And through those taps, he was about to discover a secret no one on the outside could ever imagine. Years before Tone arrived, Pelican Bay had built the SHU to contain gang leaders and violent inmates. Officials believed that cutting off contact would stop them from running operations from inside. But it had the opposite effect. Inside the SHU, the leaders adapted. They built their own language using the pipes, vents, and even the vibrations in the walls. Some used the tap code, an old military system from the Vietnam era, to pass messages between cells. Others slid tiny notes, called kites, under their doors, hoping a guard or another inmate would carry them down the hall. The guards knew it was happening, but they couldn't stop it all. The messages were too small, too clever, too frequent. Orders still got out. Deals were still made. Violence still happened, even from men locked in solitary. Tone didn't understand how deep it went until his third week inside. That's when he received his first kite. He found it during mealtime. When the tray slid through the slot in his door, a small folded paper came with it. He waited until the guard walked away, then opened it carefully. It read, "We know you can hear. We know you can follow orders. Tap twice if you want in." Tone stared at the note. He didn't know who it was from, but he had a feeling. The Nuestra Familia had men everywhere, even here. Maybe especially here. He looked around, heart pounding, then pressed his fist to the wall. Tap. Tap. That was the moment he joined the invisible world of the SHU. Every day after that, the taps became part of his life. They had meaning, short for yes, long for no, combinations for words. It was like learning a new language. Tone started to look forward to it. The walls were his only connection now. But the longer he stayed, the stranger things got. He began to lose track of time. There was no clock, no window, no sound except for his own breathing and the hum of the light. Sometimes the guards forgot his meals, or maybe they didn't, he couldn't tell anymore. The food tasted the same, warm one day, cold the next. He tried counting the days by scratching lines into the wall with a piece of metal from his bed. After a while, he stopped. The marks didn't mean anything. And then the nightmares started. They weren't like normal dreams. He'd wake up in the dark, gasping, sure that someone was standing in the corner of his cell. Once, he swore he saw movement under the door, like a shadow. But when he looked closer, nothing was there. Then came the voices. At first, whispers, too soft to understand. But soon they grew louder, more real. One voice stood out, a calm, steady tone that always said the same thing, "You're not alone, Marcus." He never told the guards. They wouldn't believe him. Maybe they already knew. A month passed. Then one morning, something changed. The guard who usually brought his tray didn't show up. Instead, a new officer appeared, tall, with dark sunglasses and no name tag. He said nothing as he slid the tray through the slot. Tone lifted the cover. Inside the food was another folded piece of paper. He opened it slowly. "Midnight. Be ready. They're watching." His stomach dropped. He didn't know what it meant, or who sent it, but the words chilled him. They're watching? Who was watching? The guards? The gang leaders? Something else? He sat back on his bed, holding the note like it was a live wire. The light above him flickered once, then steadied. The air felt heavier than usual. He looked up at the tiny vent near the ceiling. For a second, he thought he saw movement, a faint shadow behind the grate, like someone was peering down. He blinked, but it was gone. Then, from the wall beside him, came a single sound. Tap. He froze. Tap tap. Then silence. Tone's pulse raced. He stood, pressed his ear to the wall, and whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. But then he realized, the tapping wasn't coming from the usual direction. It was coming from inside the vent. A place no inmate could reach. That night, the light above his bed flickered again, and for the first time since entering the SHU, Tone felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. Pure, cold fear. He sat on his bed, gripping the note, staring at the vent as the faint tapping began again. This time, it didn't sound like a code. It sounded like breathing. The clock did not exist, but midnight arrived anyway. You could feel it in the SHU. The hum of the light seemed lower, the air colder, the concrete heavier. Marcus Tone Ramirez sat on his bunk with the note in his fist and his eyes on the vent. He had not blinked in a long time. He was afraid that if he looked away, the sound would come back and he would miss it. Tap. Then nothing. Tap tap. He waited. He tried to breathe slow, like a swimmer saving air. The vent stared back at him like a single gray eye. The grate was a tight rectangle of metal with 4 screws. The screws looked smooth, but the corners were scuffed. That detail stuck in his mind, the kind of scratch you get when someone tries to twist a screw with something that is not a screwdriver. He stood and pressed his ear to the wall beside the vent. The concrete was cold and rough, like wet sand dried in a mold. He closed his eyes. A faint draft brushed his cheek, air moving, yes, but there was another sound too. It came and went, soft and wet, as if a person on the other side was trying to breathe quietly and could not. He whispered, "Who's there?" The breath stopped. Silence filled the cell again, big and heavy. Tone's hands shook. He reached under the thin mattress and slid out the only tool he had made, a small strip of steel he had pulled from the edge of the bed frame weeks earlier. He had bent it back and forth until it snapped off. It was not sharp, not a weapon. It was a tongue, flat, thin, and stubborn. He stared at the vent screws. He told himself this was stupid. He also told himself he would do it anyway. He climbed onto the bed, pressed the strip into the first screw, and turned. It did not move. He tried again, harder, the metal biting into the slot. The strip twisted, slipped, and skated across the grate with a loud squeal. "Hey!" a voice barked from the hall. "A guard. Keep it down." Tone froze, hand in the air. His heart kicked against his ribs. He waited, listening for the key ring, the step, the shout. Nothing. The boot steps faded. The hum of the light returned like a blanket of sound. He exhaled slow. Then he tried again. This time he pressed the strip down hard to keep it from jumping. He turned. The screw gave him a tiny click, movement. He kept going. Another click. Then another. It took time. He worked each screw the way a safecracker might work a dial, patient and desperate. He stopped whenever he heard noise in the hallway, then started again when the noise passed. Minutes felt like hours. By the last screw, his fingers were numb, and the strip's edge was bent into a sad curl. He gave it one more turn. The screw popped loose and rolled into his palm. He held the grate before it fell and set it gently on the bed. Cold air poured across his face. The vent was only a foot deep before it turned downward into a tight chase full of dust. A black cable ran along one side, wrapped in tape. At the bend, he could see two pieces of plastic stuck to the wall with glue, tiny, like the guts of a toy. Tone leaned closer and squinted. It was a microphone. And next to it, a pinhole camera the size of a shirt button. A chill ran through his body that was not from the air. "They're watching," the note had said. Not a warning from a ghost. Not a threat from a rival gang. An explanation. Someone had installed the camera inside the vent, where no inmate could reach, and wired it through the wall. Not official prison gear. The build looked cheap and clever, like something a person with parts and time would make in a garage. He thought of the new officer with the dark sunglasses and no name tag. He thought of the way the man never spoke and how the tray with the note had slid in without a sound. He pictured the note again in his palm. Midnight. Be ready. They're watching. The air moved across the back of his neck. Tone swallowed. He worked his fingers into the vent and tugged the cable. It did not pull loose. He remembered what the guard had said on his first day in the SHU. "You'll hear things. Don't answer." He remembered the tapping. He remembered the breath. He looked into the dark bend and whispered, "I see you." A low hiss answered him, the kind of sound a person makes on purpose when they want you to know they're there. Then a whisper, "Stay still." Tone recoiled. The voice was male. Calm. Close. It came from the same spot as the camera. "Who are you?" Tone whispered. "Maintenance," the voice said. It did not sound like maintenance. It sounded like a person trying to wear a mask that did not fit. Tone's mouth went dry. "Why the camera?" "Insurance." "For who?" "For you," the voice said. "And for me." Tone's heartbeat ticked in his ears. He forced his words out through a mouth that felt full of sand. "What happens at midnight?" The hiss again. "Then, stand back from your door when the lights cut. Do not move. Do not speak. Do not put your hands where they can't see them. And whatever you hear, you didn't." "Didn't what?" "Didn't happen," the voice said. "If you want to live." The breath retreated. The draft stilled. Tone waited, but there was nothing more. He put the grate back, turned the screws finger tight, and slid the strip under the mattress again. Then he sat on the bed with his feet on the floor, hands resting on his knees, and stared at the door. He told himself this was a trick to scare him. He told himself nothing would happen. The light flickered. Once. Twice. Then it went out. Darkness fell so hard and sudden that it felt physical, like a heavy hood dropped over his head. Tone's breath sped up. He kept his hands on his knees to stop them from floating into the air where someone with a baton and a story might say they were a threat. A sharp click sounded at his door. The slot slid open. He saw nothing. The hole was as dark as his cell, but the slot was a darker rectangle in the dark. He wondered if a camera lens was looking through it. He wondered who held it. Boots moved in the hall. Many boots. Leather and rubber and something else, lighter and faster. A whisper traveled down the tier. 2, 3, 4, check. Another whisper answered from farther away, clear. Tone sat very still. He could smell dust and old bleach and the faint trace of something sour, like batteries. A red glow blinked to life at the far end of the hall, dim and far, as if a single exit sign had come awake. By that tiny light, shadows moved. He saw the shape of a shield and the outline of a helmet. A team. Not regular count. A cell extraction team moved like a single animal, slow, wide, ready. Tone had seen them in other prisons. They came when a man refused to cuff up, when he banged too long on a door, when he smeared the window or shouted threats. They came with body armor and cameras and paperwork. But this team did not speak loud. They did not call out rules. They moved by the red light, in the dark, like water through a pipe. They passed his door. One door down, they stopped. Tone heard a metal clang. Then a voice inside that cell, a deep voice, yelled, "I ain't resisting. I ain't resisting." The team did not answer. There was a thump, a shout, the crack of a shield hitting concrete, the cough of a spray. It was not beanbag. Pepper. The air changed, sharp and wrong. Tone's eyes watered, even with his face turned away. The deep voice turned into a choke. Then more thumps. Then silence. Boots again. The team rolled a gurney by his door. Tone looked down at the floor, not because he was trying to obey the voice in the vent, but because his body told him to. On the gurney, a shape under a blanket. The shape did not move. They were gone in seconds. The red light blinked, then died. The hole returned to full black. Tone sat in the dark and tried to slow his breathing. He counted backward from 100 in his head and lost his place at 88. He tried again. He lost his place at 62. He pressed his fingertips to his knees until the feeling in them came back. The darkness sat on him like a hand. Then the light snapped on. He blinked hard. The white glare flooded the room. His eyes burned against it. He looked at the door. The slot was shut. The hum was back. Somewhere far down the hall, a radio crackled with a normal voice saying a normal thing, Tier 4, clear. Tone stood, slow. He walked to the door and pressed his ear to it. The hall sounded like daytime again. He reached up to the vent, but he did not touch it. He did not want to know if the camera still watched. He already knew. He lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. He pictured the gurney, the blanket shape, the way the team had moved in silence. He thought of the word the voice had used, insurance. Insurance for who? If the camera fed back to a box, who held the box? If the box recorded what happened, who kept it safe? If the footage ever came out, who would be blamed? The inmate on the gurney? The team in the dark? The officer with sunglasses? He drifted into a shallow sleep that felt like a fever. When the breakfast tray came, the new officer wore a name tag, Holt. He slid the tray in, but held on to it for one extra second, eyes behind the sunglasses on Tone's face. Behind the glasses, Tone saw himself tiny and warped, two little reflections trapped in black glass. Holt let go. The tray clanked on the floor. Tone crouched. There were scrambled eggs, toast, and a small carton of milk. There was also a napkin folded in an odd way, too square, too neat. He opened it with 2 fingers. Inside was a photo, old and creased, a school picture of a girl about 12 with brown hair and a shy smile. On the back, in blue pen, was a single word, April. Tone's stomach dropped. April was his sister. He had not seen her in years. He had told no one in here her name. He had not written it. He had not said it. He felt the room tilt. Holt's voice floated in from the hall, casual and quiet. Eat up. Tone slipped the photo into his pocket and stood slowly. He carried the tray to the bed and set it down. He took the napkin in his hand and held it tight until it wrinkled into a small ball. He waited until Holt's footsteps faded. Then he pulled the photo out again and stared at the back. Below the word April, there was a smaller note, printed in tiny block letters, talk and she stays safe. Tone looked up at the vent. He could not hear breathing. The camera did not blink. The screws looked like they had never been touched. He sat on the edge of the bed and let the message sink in. The team last night had moved without witnesses except a camera inside a vent. The camera belonged to someone who also had a photo of his sister. The man with the camera knew his name, his past, and his weak point. Insurance, the voice had said. Insurance was leverage. Leverage was control. Control was the whole point of this place. He folded the photo, slid it under the mattress, and stood. He tapped twice on the wall, soft, quick, the way he had been taught. No answer. He tapped again, slower. Silence. Hours passed, maybe 1, maybe 3. Time in the SHU did not walk, it crawled. He paced 3 steps one way, 3 steps back. He did push-ups until his arms burned. He counted to 1,000. He stopped. He heard boots, then silence, then the tiny squeak of a cartwheel that needed oil. He drank the milk and set the carton on the floor and pushed it with his toe like a kid bored in a classroom. Finally, at what felt like late afternoon, a tap came back. 1 tap. Then a pause. Then 2. The pattern was old and simple. Are you alone? He tapped 3 quick times. Yes. The reply came slow, careful, like a man feeling his way across a dark room. Midnight. Again. He tapped once in answer. He didn't know whether he felt relief or dread. He sat back on the bed and told himself he would be ready. He told himself he would not panic. He told himself he would watch, and he would remember, and he would not speak unless he had to. When the light cut again, it cut without warning. The red glow bloomed at the far end of the hall. The team moved like before, silent, heavy, sure. But this time, they stopped at his door. Tone froze. He kept his hands on his knees, palms open. His mouth went dry so fast it was like someone pulled the water out of him with a straw. He looked down at the floor and tried not to move. The slot opened. A camera lens stared in. A little red dot glowed at the top of it, slow and steady. Not the vent camera. A helmet camera. Official. Filming. Ramirez, a voice said. Calm. Tired. Professional. Back of the cell. Knees. Tone slid to the back, knelt, laced his fingers behind his head. He kept his face down. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Hands through the slot, the voice said. He crawled forward on his knees and fed his hands through. The cuffs bit his wrists, tight and final. The slot slammed shut. Door, the voice said. The magnetic lock clacked. The door swung open. 5 men in armor filled the frame. The front man held a shield that looked like a dark wall. The second held the camera. The third had a spray clipped to his vest. The fourth and fifth were hands, muscle, speed. Behind them stood Officer Holt, sunglasses on though there was no sun, clipboard in his hand. Tone kept his head down. He could smell the oil on the shield, the plastic of gloves, the boot polish, the sour edge of old pepper. He could hear the camera's tiny motor. He could hear his own breath loud and wrong in the big white light. Ramirez, the tired voice said. Listen carefully. We are going to escort you to medical. You will stand. You will not speak. You will not pull away. If you comply, no force will be used. Do you understand? Tone nodded. Yes. Stand. He did. The hands took his elbows and lifted him like he weighed nothing. He stepped forward. The shield moved back, then sideways, then his cell door was behind him and the hall was in front of him and he could see down the tier for the first time. The gray doors, the small windows, the red exit sign at the end. They walked. Boots on concrete. Camera whir. The world narrowed to the sound of feet and the shock of bright lights after so much dark. They passed the cell where the team had stopped the night before. The window in that door was blacked out with a sheet of paper taped from the inside. At the corner, Holt stepped up close and spoke so only Tone could hear. Relax, he said. You're doing great. Tone kept his eyes on the floor. Why am I going to medical? He asked, quiet. Holt smiled without his mouth moving. Because you're sick, he said. They turned into a short corridor that led away from the main tier. At the end, a door with a sign, Exam 3. The door was open. Inside, a small room with a table, a sink, a cabinet. Fluorescent light buzzed. No doctor. No nurse. No stethoscope. Just a man in a gray suit sitting on a stool, hands folded, face clean and blank. No badge. No name tag. He looked like a banker who took a wrong turn into a prison.